Hello everybody, today we're gonna look at the game that Magnus plays versus Kukesh. He shows up 15 seconds late to the game and plays e4, e5, and we get the Ruy Lopez, the Berlin defense, immediate pressure on the e5 pawn, he defends, the bishop comes out, and instead of c6 preparing d4, which is the main line, and you try to get the knight around like that, he plays the knight out to c3. This is kind of a draw's position, but I think he has his prep. So now he takes and puts the bishop on this square. He's happy if Kukesh takes, because when he castles, the f file will be open and he has support to the center break. I'm sorry for that. So that's why I play the bishop. The bishop drops back and the bishop pins h6. You do not want to play g5 in this position because it's just too weakening for your king. So the bishop pins h6 and he takes. Now you have pressure on this and you're threatening to double the pawns after this massive exchange. So the bishop drops back, take, and now g3. Maybe just securing these squares. Queen comes up and now h5. The bishop comes back, castle, getting out of the pin, so f4 is an idea in the future. Putting pressure to the knight. Knight drops back, taking the bishop. If you take, the rook comes to the b file, winning this pawn, splitting these double pawns, so that's bad. So the bishop drops back. And now Magnus goes for a kingside attack with g5, and then he will open up, the rook will come over, the queen will join the attack, the knight will jump around. But Kukesh plays this move, so after this he will close it like that, and after this he will close it like this. So now the knight comes, the queen, and I thought an idea here was to play h5, and after he pushes you get this beautiful square for the knight with a lot of pressure. But I guess that's not the best move, it's just best to play something like this, because this is not really scary. But I thought this would be okay, but because of the bishop there's a lot of pressure, but I thought this position would be just fine. But instead of that we have the rook coming to this file, this one rook coming to the center, enabling, it doesn't let white play c3 with this idea, because then this pawn will hang. So h5 coming after the bishop, h5 back, so the bishop always has a square and this pawn doesn't get any further. The queen drops back, preparing f5, the rook slides up, the queen tries to reroute, and now this move h5, you cannot play this because you will get forked. And now the rook is behind, so when you open up there will be power, and also this queen looks at the square. So the queen comes, queen trade, and now the knight drops back, looking for this maneuver, going to this very nice square. The rook puts pressure, just defends everything. The rook jumps in this nice square, takes, pawn takes, to put pressure on this pawn. I think I would have played king takes to get my structure intact, but then this rook would be trapped probably. Defense, rook takes, king takes, and now, like I told you, the knight will come around, but this is just actually a losing mistake. The rook coming here, he should have played bishop to d4 for example, putting pressure, and then something like knight g3 he gives, because the pawn isn't really capturable, but instead he goes for this. And this is losing because of knight d2, which Magnus plays. And when the knight comes back, you cannot really defend the pawn. And if you defend it with rook, now I play rook b1, ready to play b4. So you stop b4. Now I give this check, king moves up, and now I'm just gonna bring my king to the center. And white is not up a pawn, but his pawn structure is way healthier than black's pawn structure. Also this bishop is blocked in by all the pawns. You cannot push this pawn to free it up, because you will hang it. So the bishop drops back, but that loses this pawn, sacrificing another pawn to rip open the position. Take, king takes, king goes to the center, king comes even further to the center, and now the rook does this, but this pawn falls. After the check I just block it with my pawn, the knight will come back. But first I centralize the rook with this threat to win the pawn. So the rook check defends the pawn, king comes back, bishop blocking the rook's vision, the rook comes up, defending this pawn for when the rook wants to go there, but the king goes there, kicking away the bishop, and now we get active. The rook attacks this one, and in this position the rook has resigned. It wasn't even the best move, there was mate in 3 with knight to d8, because these squares are all taken. You threaten this checkmate, so the only move is rook takes b4 and then you take. Then there's no move that can save you. If you move the pawn, these pawns can move. If you move the bishop anywhere, this checkmate and the king doesn't have any moves. So it would be over, but instead Magnus takes the pawn. In this position he's up 2 pawns. He has the activity. So Kokesh just resigned because he knew I'm going to lose this position. And that's how Magnus Carlsen defeated the world champ, because he is the real world champ. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day. Goodbye.